Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Garrison, and I want to welcome you to day 151 of Humanity Rising. Humanity Rising is an initiative of Ubiquity University and over 350 partnering organizations from around the world who came together almost spontaneously in the midst of the pandemic in the spring to create an open space day by day, so that people from around the world could come together to share their experiences, their visions, their solutions, their strategies, so that we can ensure that we make it through the pandemic all in one piece, and that we can fashion a better world working in the spirit of what we call radical collaboration. We've covered a range of issues over the 151 days: science, economics, politics, art, culture, technology, ecology, and spirituality. And I think one of the most persistent themes in the Humanity Rising sessions has been how we participate in a new narrative about humanity's relationship to the Mother Earth. We are not separate from the earth. We are earth. We are nature. We are the environment. This session today, me talking, you listening, is the earth in intelligible communication with herself. Universally, spiritual traditions have honored the feminine aspect of the divine, of the sacred, as in some way an essential ingredient in the process of transformation. And that, probably more than anything, is what the world needs now: a radical transformation, so that we can fulfill our destiny as children of the earth. So we want to explore now a woman who was centrally involved in the origins of Christianity, who was forced into the subterranean realms and marginalized by the patriarchal structures, but who has emerged within the last decades as a powerful force in the renewal of Western and Abrahamic spirituality, and that is the person of Mary Magdalene. And I want to just say that this is not an academic exercise for me. Mary Magdalene, if I have a patron saint, it would be Mary Magdalene. And I'd like to just take a moment as we commence our program to tell you the story. Many of you know I had the great pleasure of working with Mikhail Gorbachev for about 10 years, convening leadership groups all over the world. Then 9/11 happened, and the war on terror began, and the work that we had done together was concluded. And over a period of several years, I was in a deep inquiry. What should I do next? I knew a woman, a Iroquois elder named Apila Colorado of the Oneida tribe of the Iroquois Nation. And one day, out of the blue in the summer of 2004, she called me up and she said, "Jim, I've had a dream. And then the dream, you became the president of a small university that I'm teaching at as faculty. And they're going bankrupt. They're in deep financial troubles and they don't know what to do. But in my dream, I was told that you're the guy that should come in and provide new leadership. I couldn't conceive of doing something like that because in my head, I was still involved in international politics and work on the nuclear weapons issue and the issue of various environmental issues. So I thanked her profusely and ignored her. Then a couple months later, she called back and in a very stern voice said, "Jim, I've had a second dream. I'm not kidding this time." And to make a long story very short, I ended up in December meeting with Matthew Fox, the founder of the university, accepting the role as turnaround officer, as president, and commenced my tenure in February of 2005. Apila guided the entire process of my entry into the university. And as I began to take on the responsibilities, I talked with Apila and I said, give me some counsel. How do I make sure that this is going to succeed? And she says, I'll tell you. You need to dedicate your tenure as president of the university to Mary Magdalene and the Black Madonna. I'd heard of Mary Magdalene, of course, as the son of a missionary, knew the stories well, but had never gone into it. I knew about the Black Madonna, but again, not very well. And under Apila's tutelage, I began a deep inquiry. And in the fall of 2005, Apila, another faculty member, Andrew Harvey, if you know him, one of the great contemporary mystics, we all went together to France with about 40 of our graduate students. We followed in the footsteps of Mary Magdalene, who by tradition and by legend, after the passing, the ascension of Jesus, spent some time in Alexandria, and then was led of the Spirit, some say with Joseph of Arimathea, and a child that she had with Jesus, Sarah, to France. And there for the rest of her life gave ministry to the Celtic nation. We started the pilgrimage in an extraordinary place in just north of the Pyrenees Mountains, Roc Amador, which is the site of the most powerful of the Black Madonnas. There's over 320 Black Madonnas around Europe, and the one in Roc Amador is considered the most potent. And ever since that moment, my tenure has been on a day-to-day basis in reverence for the sacred feminine, in acknowledgement of the extraordinary role that Mary Magdalene played at the birth of Christianity and in the life of Jesus as both lover, communicator, and as some scholars are now suggesting, is actually the author of what we now call the Gospel of John. Very powerful presence. Pushed into the subterranean realms, as I said, and then has emerged through the Nag Hammadi text with a clarity and a power that is revealing for the first time in 2,000 years the extraordinary role that she played, not only in the life of Jesus as his beloved disciple and friend, but as a teacher in the early church. And you can just feel the distinction between Mary Magdalene and the other disciples by just knowing the distinction between the grandeur and the elegance of the Gospel of John. and what they call the synoptic gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. So as we commence this session today, I do so in deep humility, deep gratitude for Apila, Colorado, and the ancestors, and an acknowledgement that everything that Ubiquity has become, from our pedagogy to our mystery school in Chartres, France, our Chartres Academy, to Humanity Rising, all has been conceived and sculpted and embodied in reverence to the feminine. So it's in that spirit that I welcome all of you today. And I want to now welcome Dr. Kayleen Asbo, who took her PhD in Mary Magdalene studies and has been a faculty with our Wisdom School in a very, very powerful way. If you go on our website, just look at all the courses that Kayleen provides for us and through her own organization, Mythica. We will be talking as the hour goes by and concluding on some plans that we have to continue this dedication to Mary Magdalene, because she's emerged in our collective psyche for a very specific reason around redemption. She holds it all. So Kayleen, thank you so much, and I turn the program over to you.
Thank you so much, Jim. And I love that you shared the roots of your own story with Ubiquity and with Apila, because so much of the message about and from Mary Magdalene is returning to our roots, returning to the essence of what is good and what is true and what is beautiful, and recovering the things that have been lost and hidden, both across the centuries and also within us. And I think it is perhaps more than serendipity that this particular lecture falls on this week, when you began so beautifully with Richard Dunn's presentation on harmony. And one of the lines in the Gospel of Mary, a work that we're going to touch on today that's just so pivotal and important, is be in harmony. And this is why the good, with a capital G, has come into your midst to reunite you with your roots. And this complex interweaving of nature and spirituality and contemplation as a beautiful pathway of renewal is what we're going to be celebrating today. So whether you come from deep within a Christian tradition, or whether you are following the path of the Buddha or the Sufi path or a mystic path of another name or the path of science, one of the things about Mary Magdalene that I feel so deeply is that she speaks to all of us in the depths of our being, and that her cloak, what I call her cloak of compassion, that we're going to see an image of painted on a wall, is large enough to hold us all. She is visionary. She is, as Jim spoke about, she is coming to people in dreams and images, both people from the Christian tradition and also so many people outside of it are having dreams and images of her come. And so I want to invite you in particular to think about, as we go through this next hour together, the dreams and the visions and the images inside of you. And one of Mary Magdalene's teachings, a teaching that got passed on through the contemplative tradition throughout the centuries, first in the caves of La Baume, where in French story she spent the last 30 years of her life, and then later through the deep monastic tradition of Jean Cassian and Saint Benedict and the contemplative orders of Benedictine spirituality and the contemplative vein that runs through Franciscans and Dominicans and Carmelites. There's this call, this pathway of awakening and remembrance by returning into the depths that can be found in the still point of the turning world through song and silence. So today we are graced then to have in our circle of sharing about Magdalene and her power to awaken within us three people who are near and dear to my artistic, aesthetic, and spiritual heart to share parts of these pathways. And they're little tastes, they're in a amuse-bouche, if you will, for the year to come, which I am calling in my own work the Year of Magdalene. And we're going to have first song with Catherine Braslovsky's voice singing this gorgeous chant from the 2nd century in Aramaic, the language of Yeshua, the language of Mary Magdalene, that is about the tree of life. We're going to hear about 1 minute of this piece, Ilono, and then we'll hear the whole piece sort of as our ending sequence so that we'll have those bookends from the 2nd century. And for the few who've been following along with Humanity Rising, just know then that the imagery here, this tree of life that's so central to the Kabbalistic tradition of awakening, of finding the scattered pieces of the divine and then bringing them together to illuminate the world. And that tree of life that those of you who've read the extraordinary Gospel of the Beloved Companion translated by Jean de Quillon, and in chapter 42, that central image is of the ascent of the tree of wisdom, eating of the fruits of love and compassion and strength and understanding. That this is an image then that echoes within us. And in that text, which legend says that Mary Magdalene brought with her after the events of devastation of the crucifixion to France, and she nurtured and gave birth to that in the caves of La Baume, these writings that echo now in our time, that we're invited to find the tree in our own heart. So I want to invite you for the next minute. Rick is going to play about 1 minute of this 4-minute exquisite chant that you'll be able to find elsewhere. Catherine Braslovsky's haunting voice. And we're going to listen for 1 moment to settle into this song, hearing the language of Yeshua and Mary Magdalene sung by a woman whose voice burst forth after her own encounter in the caves of La Baume, where she heard the voice of Mary Magdalene calling to her to sing. And she left her pathway as a scientist to follow what would seem foolish nonsense, this pathway of awakening of the unknown path. So as you hear this voice wash over you, I invite you to hold your own dear heart and breathe deeply as you're bathed in these sounds. And then I will pass the rose, as it is said in Ubiquity. I'll pass the rose to David Cadman, my beloved colleague from the University of Wales and the Harmony Project, who himself is dedicated to Mary Magdalene. And he will lead us in the contemplative practice of silence, because as the Gospel of Mary says, it was in silence that the teacher spoke to her and awakened in her imagination a pathway of profound healing and hope. And when we've finished with David's presentation, which includes 3 minutes of silence, in which I invite us all to find that still point within our hearts, I'll come back to tell more of the story with some images that are related both to the early Christian texts that got lost and the French traditions that survive. And then I'll introduce you to my friend Thomas Dodd, who I met at a festival of Mary Magdalene in New Orleans, who through his own visionary art is bringing forth images that express the fullness of our humanity. One of the words that describes Mary Magdalene in this so-called Gnostic text in the Gospel of Thomas is anthropos, fully human. And as an archetype that leads us into this journey of becoming fully human, to hold both grief and joy and wed them into our heart. Thomas is a beacon of inspiration for many, and we'll have an invitation for you to participate in this coming year of Magdalene. So with great pleasure, I want to introduce to you then David Cadman, who's coming to us from England on his birthday. Happy birthday, dear David. And instead of a happy birthday song, then we're going to hear a Lono, which I hope will go into your heart. And then you can take the rose from there and lead us into this practice of silence. So Rick, if you'll cue up a Lono for the blessings for both David and all our world. And to you, my dear friend David.
Thank you, Kayleen. I think we need someone to just, oh, here we are. Let's start my video, that's it. Here I am. Some of you will know, because you will have enjoyed her teachings before, that Kayleen often refers to words and images that are green and juicy. Perhaps because I'm a somewhat old English man and a birthright Quaker, I can't do green and juicy. Indeed, instead, what I want to share with you is silence and love. But first, I want to take a few moments to respond to something profound that Jim said in a recent webinar. He said, "There is no more normal," which is to say that something all around us has been broken to such an extent that we cannot simply put it back together again. Something else is needed, some new way of being and discovering, and it requires our very urgent attention. There is much that we could say about this, but one necessary part of this transformation Jim has spoken about is silence and love. In a way, it's odd to be speaking about silence, since silence has no words. But because it does not, it can be shared both in intimacy and across great distances. And it can be shared between people who do not even speak the same tongue. Silence is not the absence of something. Rather, it is the presence of something. Something I can only describe as a deep and divine love, or perhaps loving. Perhaps it's like the dark matter of the cosmos, the spaces between, without which nothing is, the comma, the full stop, the pause in the music. What if we were to rest in it? Let it gather us in. Towards the end of the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, as it's translated by Jean-Yves Leloup, there is this most wonderful passage that Kayleen has already spoken of. Mary Magdalene has been talking about the teachings she has just received from her teacher and companion, Yeshua. She says, "Henceforth, I travel towards repose, where time rests in the eternity of time. I go now into silence." And then it is said, having said all this, Mary became silent, for it was in silence that the teacher spoke to her. Let's hear that once more. Henceforth, I travel towards repose, where time rests in the eternity of time. I go now into silence. Having said all this, Mary became silent, for it was in silence that the teacher spoke to her. In his commentary on this part of the gospel, Jean-Yves Leloup says that the place of repose, the place to which Mary is traveling, is a place beyond ordinary time, a place where there is nothing for the senses to grasp onto. It is a place which lacks all sensations, emotions, and thoughts. There is only silence. Even love does not feel like love in this space, not as we know it. And yet, it is the space of the very source of love. As I have tried to set out in my book, Love and the Divine Feminine, this teaching of love and repose is part of the special teachings that were given to Mary Magdalene before Yeshua was gone. Teachings of unconditional love that were lost in the great church's obsession with sin and redemption. An obsession that required the story of a man brutally put to death to save us from our sins. How shocking. For 2,000 years, the teachings of love that Yeshua shared with Magdalene, teachings that may have been recorded, some say, in a book of love, have been lost to us. But now, mysteriously, inexplicably, these teachings are coming back to us, not least through this wonderful university. For however much we may think we have to search for love, love is always there. It is ever present. It is the being of the cosmos. In the preface to Love and the Divine Feminine, Love speaks and says, I am the messenger of stars and of river, wind, and earth. Hear me. Invite me in, and for a while suppose what I say is true. For I speak of being in love, and once upon a time is always here. Love is a way of being. Love is a way of doing. Love can only be known in its being and doing in every moment of every day. Breathing in and breathing out can be acts of love. We have to surrender and give way to love. We have to find a place for love in every moment, in every place, here and now, and here and now, and here and now. We can say that love has certain qualities, and we can ponder on what those qualities might be, but that does not bring love into being. For love arises only in the practice of love, a kind of prayer without ceasing. Kindliness helps. It helps a lot. Being kind to one another in all those small ways that wait for us. And caring for the earth and for each other. Indeed, according to love, that is the main purpose of being here at all, to take care. And we don't have to wait to be told about love. We can just bring love into every moment of our time, our being. The next person we meet, the next person we speak to, at home, at work, shopping for food, the next meeting we have to attend. Whatever we are doing, we can do with love and attend with love. And unlike so much of what we're asked to do, love cannot be done in a hurry. It's not a competition. We can't have love, for love is found when it is shared or given away. And the more we give, the more there is to give. But it does require a kind of discipline, an unending intention to love, and a watchfulness too. Noticing when in those moments of irritation and fearfulness, we let love slip away. But love never really slips away. Love is always there, ready to be, ready to take place, ready to be done. Love is a way of being. Love is a way of doing, now, now, now. But most especially, to find love, we need must find silence and stillness. For silence and stillness are the ground of love. Silence and waiting. So I come back to silence, and especially to gathered silence, the still point in the turning world, as T.S. Eliot puts it, where past and future are gathered, neither movement from nor towards, neither ascent nor decline, except for the point, the still point. There would be no dance, and there is only the dance. Since the onset of COVID-19, the arrival of the messenger, I have been attending 3 separate, private, remote gatherings that are held in silence. One of these is a gathering of local Quakers from near to where I live, and one is a group of people in Iceland who have invited me to join in their gathering. And the last, which is part of something called the Spirit of Humanity Forum, includes people from all around the world, including North America, South America, the Nordic countries, and different parts of Europe, all gathered together for a short moment of silence every week. In each of these, especially as the gatherings are repeated regularly at the same time each week, the sense of gathered silence is deep and profound. However far apart we might be, and in some cases we are very far apart, we are brought together, gathered in by the silence, just as we might be here at the Ubiquity University. And indeed, perhaps this university would be interested in such a regular Zoom gathering of its members in silence. It need only be for 15 minutes a week. And my dear friends, there is an interesting quality to these gatherings of silence, which we should note and learn from. In every case, they are predominantly populated by women. This corresponds with something else that Jim said the other evening, something that I would also say too. If we want to find our way to a different place, to what Jim has called an urgent, radical collaboration, we must listen to women. We must be led by women. We want to see a full integration of the masculine and the feminine, but we have so allowed ourselves to be shaped by a dominant male culture, causing great harm, that now, for the time being, and until some greater balance and harmony can be achieved, we men, in the presence of women, must stand aside and make the tea and pass round the shortbread while the women speak. So there it is. And in my ending, I come back to silence. In the spirit of radical collaboration, one thing we can share is silence, a gathered silence. And so before I hand over to Kayleen, I want to invite us here to come into silence together for 3 minutes. No words, no music, no chat room, just being together in silence, the place of love. Let's try it. And don't worry, I'll let you know when the 3 minutes have ended. Sit with me in silence. Thank you, dear friends.
Thank you, David. When we go deeply enough into that silence, I'm reminded so much of what Brother Roger Schutz said at the Taizé community in France, where I was a pilgrim several times and got to meet him. And he said, if we speak about religious dogma and doctrine, our words divide us. But if we can sit in silence and sing with one another, the doors of our heart will begin to open in trust, in hope, and in love. So the next contemplative practice that is woven with the Magdalene path of awakening that I would like to introduce you to is with my dear friend Catherine Breslovsky, who I met at Chartres Cathedral, whose voice you heard earlier with Ilono. And this that she's going to share with us now is a chant that she wrote to Mary Magdalene. Catherine, I'm so glad you're here with us. We'll need you to unmute yourself in order to be able to hear your beautiful voice.
You hear
The
me?
rest of us will stay muted, but we'll do a call and responsive song with Catherine.
So, the song we are going to sing together is a song for Mary Magdalene, who came to me. It's a very simple song, but let's try. So maybe I'll sing it once so that you have a full picture of the song, and then I'll teach you and we'll sing there. So it goes like that. Our 4 sentences. O Sancta Magdalena, O dulcis amica, O fortissimus amor, O sorrow. It's a kind of mantra, psalmody. So the words, the first sentence is, "Oh, sacred Saint Magdalena." Can you try with me? Alors, I'm first, of course, and then you try to repeat, okay? O Sancta Magdalena. We try? O Sancta Magdalena. Second is, O dulcis amica, O sweet friend. O dulcis amica. Together. O dulcis amica. The third one is, O fortissimus amor, O love, highest love, strongest love. So, O fortissimus amor. Together. O fortissimus amor. And the last one is, O sister, O soror. O sorrow. Together. O sorrow. So now we are just going to repeat it in response. So I do a first line and we repeat together several times. And we do as the Indians do, you know, we do as if we knew already the piece. So you just follow me as close as possible and we'll be together. So I'm starting. O Sancta Magdalena. Together. O Sancta Magdalena. O dulcis amica. O dulcis amica, O fortissimus amor, O fortissimus You want what once more, Kaylin, or is good? Once more? I don't hear you.
Again, please, 2 more times.
Okay, very good. So we repeat that way, like response, call and response. Let's go. O Santa Magdalena, O Santa Magdalena, O dulcis amica, O dulcis amica, O fortissimus amor, O fortissimus amor, O soror, O soror, O Santa Magdalena, O dulcis amica, O fortissimus amor, O soror.
Thank you, my beloved friend, Catherine, for gracing us with your voice. I want to encourage all of you to look for Catherine Brodslowski's music that you can find. She's 12 albums and all dedicated to the sacred feminine. And I'm keeping, I nudge Catherine every time I see her to say, please do a Mary Magdalene album. Please do a Mary Magdalene album. I think this is the year. So Catherine and David will both be joining with me together to create this Year of Magdalene in partnership with many organizations, including Ubiquity University, but also Dominican Retreat Center and Jungian conferences and the Abbey of the Arts in Ireland and all kinds of explorations of virtual pilgrimages, because we are all in a situation right now where we cannot go forth into the world. It is this grand invitation to come inside the depth of our hearts. And so for the next few moments, I'm going to just share a little bit about the archetype of Mary Magdalene and one reason why I think she's so critical for us right now in this time. And what we'll see then here, this image is an image in the place called La Madeleine, which is a cave in France in the Dordogne. And it's the very word Magdalene is where we get the phrase Magdalenian art, of cave art of the highest period, that is also intimately interwoven, strangely enough, with rituals of grief and lamentation, but also love. And this is the time where she is coming to reunite us with our roots. And two of the texts that were rediscovered in the 20th century, the Gospel of Thomas, rediscovered in 1945 in the depths of World War II, and then the Gospel of Mary, which was recovered at the end of the 19th century, but not translated until our own time. The translations in English that I most cherish are actually by Catherine's husband, Joseph Rao, that you see on screen. It is his English rendition of Jean-Yves Leloup's marvelous mystical words. And behind me in this image that you see is the exquisite monastery of Saint-Michel du Var, which is in Provence. It is the place in which dreams and visions were listened to, and the words brought forth and translated and gifted to us now in our time that echo across the centuries. So these two quotes, when will the kingdom come? Yeshua is asked by his students, and he responds, when you make an image to replace an, it should say to replace an image, when you make an image to replace an image. And then from the Gospel of Mary, this is why the good has come into your midst to reunite you with your roots. And this image on the left by my friend Rose Wagnum Francis is the behind panel of an image that we're going to see in just a few moments, with these symbols for our time, the symbol of the dove of peace, the Holy Spirit, the vine, the flowering of life from the tree, and then the depth of the roots in the earth. The image that was created of Mary Magdalene beginning in the 4th century and unfolding up again until the 20th century is one of erasure and gradual replacement. If we actually look at the biblical stories deeply, all biblical scholars will tell you that Mary Magdalene by name in the Bible is present in very specific ways. By the name Mary Magdalene, she is the loyal, faithful witness who is there witnessing the death of her beloved rabbi. And she is the privileged first witness of the resurrection when she comes and greets the new day on Easter morn. And if we take those two symbols, she stands at the threshold between the death of an old life and the threshold of a new life as witness, as teacher's beloved disciple who then carries forth the message to the world. But these images that you're going to see by Giotto show what happened to her over time. Here she is in her biblical place at the foot of the cross, faithful, loyal witness. And here then we see other mystic figures, in this case, Saint Francis, kneeling in emulation of Mary Magdalene, following the Magdalene pathway of contemplation and of compassion. But notice what happens over time. Here, instead of Mary Magdalene being at the foot of the cross, Francis, as much as I love him, has taken her place. And then there are the wealthy donors instead. And Mary Magdalene is pushed to the sides in her red cloak. You see her far off, almost out of the picture. And throughout much of human history, then, she has been completely cut out. And if you look at this image and put your finger straight on your screen where the Virgin and Child are, and then go to the left, you'll have an analogy of what happened to Mary Magdalene over time, that she was literally cut out of the picture, erased, and eventually the image of a penitent sinner, a repentant prostitute, came and was, I'll call it graffitied into this vacuum. And what we are in the process of is a process of reclamation, of remembering. This is the image by my friend Shiloh Sophia McLeod, who I hope will appear with ubiquity in the future to lead us all in exercises of intentional creativity with her foundation, the Musea community. And this image that graced Women's History Month at an art museum that I produced is called the Cantos of Reclamation. All these fantastic symbols of sacred geometry that those of you who have eyes to see will see and witness in this. And this is what we're invited to. We're invited to remember, religare, to put back together what has been torn asunder. And in remembering Mary Magdalene, part of our world, part of our psyche will be remembered. And one of the reasons she's so important right now is we see in images of the past, like Georges de la Tour, that she is someone who is capable of touching death, of being present for suffering, and yet, the light never overcomes it. That she then is able to gaze with the eyes, the face of compassion, and to remember our mortality. The teaching that she passed on and that emerges in Benedictine spirituality and the rule of Saint Benedict is memento mori, to always be in touch with death, and yet to be the herald of new life. And this is one reason why we see so many images like this, Artemisia Gentileschi, connecting to the Magdalene within after the horrors of her own rape and trial. She eventually found her way through, after horrors, to connecting with herself, the Magdalene within, touching death, yes, but also more deeply connected to her own dear heart. And this is one reason why I think Magdalene is so important for us during COVID as death swirls around us. That she comes as the herald to remember her place in the earliest part of Christian scripture, where she comes as the teacher of teachers, the apostle to the apostles. And part of what we are reclaiming and remembering in our time then through texts like the Gospel of Thomas and the Pistis Sophia and the Gospel of Philip, works which were buried and forgotten for 1600 years in the sands, in the deserts, in the caves of Egypt, and now are really coming to their place in the light, is her earliest titles as the woman who embodied wisdom, the woman who knew all, the woman who received the special teachings of her teacher, whom he called blessed above all thy brethren, for she has understood the fullness of being and become fully human. Now that wisdom teaching she took with her from Judea to Alexandria in Egypt for several years, and then through a rudderless boat, she arrived in the shores of Provence. And this mountain that you see before you, this glorious place, is a mountain of silence and contemplation. It had been dedicated to the Greek goddess Artemis, the protectress of wild things and nature, for 700 years before Magdalene arrived. And it was here that legend tells us that in her cave of contemplation then, that she would go into that state of silence and then be lifted by the songs of the angels 7 times a day. And this pattern, the mountain of La Sainte Baume means healing. And that healing comes from silence and song. So this image of Magdalene in the caves of La Baume, here where Jean-Yves Leloup actually was a Dominican confessor before he became a French Orthodox priest and then translated those works. This is the root, the forgotten root of the contemplative Christian tradition. And very briefly, it stretches from John Cassian and the wisdom of desert fathers and mothers to Saint Benedict of Francis, on and on and on. And on the walls of Saint Michel du Var, here is the image of Magdalene as the towering figure of compassion, the rock of strength. And underneath her red cloak are the centuries of saints who have followed in her footsteps. Here painted on the walls by Vadim Garin, you will see Hildegard of Bingen, Francis of Assisi, St. Catherine of Siena, and on and on and on. It is a pathway that invites us to remember. Part of what we are reclaiming as well is Mary Magdalene's universality as a woman. Black Madonna is an image that holds all the colors. And we see in contemporary artists then this reimagining, remembering of Mary Magdalene's earlier roots. Here, this incredible icon by the Franciscan Robert Lentz that hangs in Grace Cathedral in San Francisco, inviting us to remember her Jewishness that is so often forgotten. And this image by my beloved friend Sue Ellen Parkinson, after taking one of my workshops, is the blessing for our times, is that Magdalene is a circle of blessing that invites us all, of all ages, of all races, of all faiths, men and women alike, but here in the circle of the feminine, to give birth to joy, symbolize the 5 hummingbirds above the head. So Magdalene's invitation is, can we awaken the cathedral of our heart? Can we find and reclaim the stories that place her as Christ's right hand, as a teacher, as a maestra, as the apostle to the apostles, the teacher of the teachers, and reclaim the wisdom that she has to offer us? The artwork that we're seeing emerge, like Janet McKenzie's extraordinary artwork, invite us to create a new image where there was once a dejected, forlorn woman on her knees with tears down her face and her bare bosom open for the world to see. We are invited to reclaim her dignity, her power, her fullness. The Grail stories say that the Grail was a substance, a chalice that would feed and heal the world, but also give people what they most longed for. So what I invite people to contemplate is, more than anything, to pay attention to what is the Mary Magdalene inside your heart. Who is she? Because she can hold us all, black and white, male and female, and lead us to this place of healing, this place of open-heartedness, this place where we remember our roots and flower in our fullness and are connected to the spiral of life. Mary Magdalene's teachings were not given inside of a church. They were given in France, in the forests, in nature. And she invites us in Rose Wognan's Frances's images to be the woman of all, embracing us all in this invitation to love by Janet McKenzie. So this is just but a taste of the year to come. Part of this will emerge as in this painting of Emerging by Thomas Dodd on January 22nd, which will begin the new online cycle of 22 days that I'll have. But we'll start with January 1st, 2nd, and 3rd, a virtual pilgrimage with Catherine, with David, with hopefully Joseph Rao, Catherine's husband, who translated into English the Gospel of Mary, as we explore the roots of the contemplative Christian tradition. And then with Ubiquity and other partners throughout the world, we'll follow this blessing thread in the tradition of Mary Magdalene to the Celtic realms, on the Camino Santiago in Spain, in the Pyrenees, in Italy, in the footsteps of St. Francis, who cherished Mary Magdalene in his heart. She is coming to us to invite us to give birth to the images inside of us that are emerging in this time of darkness. And before I pass it on then to my friend Thomas Dodd, this last saying, light and darkness, life and death, right and left, are brothers of one another. They are inseparable. The Magdalene path holds them both. The path of the rose holds them both, the thorns and the beauty and the blessing that we are to become if we open to the fullness, a blessing we will become if we root in the depths of silence and stillness. So my friend, Thomas, artist extraordinary visionary who I encountered in New Orleans for a festival of Mary Magdalene, will you please come and share with us your journey with Mary Magdalene and some of the images that she's given to you?
Thank you, Kayleen, for that gracious introduction. I'm honored to be in the company of such wonderful people today. I just wanted to briefly say that this all kind of hinges for me on a pivotal moment in my life. When I look back on it, I was very young. I was maybe 4 years old. My Irish grandmother, she came over. She's a very strong woman. She was a widow. She raised 5 children during the Depression. She came over on the Lusitania, which was sunk on the return voyage. But when I was a little boy, I was fretting about something, whatever, a 4-year-old child would fret about, Lord knows. But she said to me, always pray to the Blessed Virgin, and she will answer your prayers. And my 4-year-old mind grasped that concept that God had a mother, and the mother was who you went to if you wanted action, if you wanted things done. So that was the seed that was planted in my mind. And as I grew older and I began to question my faith, and thankfully I avoided parochial school, but I did go to Sunday school, and I used to ask the questions that couldn't be answered. And I was always told, you have to have faith. And I was named well. I am a doubting Thomas. So from the age of about 8 on, I started to doubt all the dogma that had been grilled into me. And as I got older still, became a young man in my 20s, I called myself an atheist bordering on agnostic. That was how I labeled myself. In my late 20s, I started to go on a spiritual quest. I realized there had to be something more than just this veil at this short life on earth, and then blackness, nothingness. There had to be something more. And so I started studying world religions. I started reading lots of texts of so-called New Age books, things of this nature. And the writings of Carl Jung, and specifically on archetypes, really resonated with me because it appealed to my rational mind, but also I was a musician, and I started to see like these mythopoetic themes are things that I unconsciously have used, and the whole idea of the collective unconscious kind of came to the fore. So I studied Joseph Campbell, again, a mythopoetic, and then I chanced upon a book called Holy Blood, Holy Grail that laid it all out, the Magdalene, and how the Magdalene was the Holy Grail, how she brought, the fruit of her womb to France, just laid it all out. So it was there. And then I was able to fuse that into my work as a musician. And then as I transferred it into a visual artist, it was the same thing, these archetypes, these themes that have always been there, that are there in our DNA, that are coded in our essence, in our being. And to invoke that, which I do in music, which I do in art, is something that is, to me, is like my form of prayer. It is my form of spirituality. And years later, then I was able to meet like-minded souls, chancing upon Kayleen at a show in New Orleans, and just realizing that there's a community of people that are doing this kind of work, this mythopoetic work, and very deep spiritual work that's not just mumbo jumbo, that isn't just making pronouncements, is actually going out and touching people's lives in a very profound way. So I've been honored to be part of this. And I'm going to share my screen just for a second here and show you a little bit of my artwork. And if you want to see more of my work, so thomasdodd.com is my website, and I will put a link up there. But I'm going to, let's see here. Trying to see if there's a place to share my screen on here. Let's see. Right here, okay. So can you all see that? Kayleen, can you see the image that I'm showing?
Yes, we can see it, Thomas.
Great. So this right here is a very simple photographic image that I did of a model that I deliberately wanted to portray Mary Magdalene in a very simple, unadorned way. And this is kind of like an intro to my photography, but most of what I was doing prior to this image are images that were more assembled in Photoshop. So some of my earlier work, I was commenting on contemporary themes, but trying to put biblical references in them. So this obviously is a Pieta. It's a riff on a Pieta and violence in the inner cities. And then this I was commissioned to do by a hip hop label in Atlanta. And you see I position the woman in the Magdalene position, because I consider Mary Magdalene to have been the prime apostle, the one who was overlooked. And so I riffed a lot on my Christianity, on my Catholic upbringing, biblical stories, and kind of threw them into my work. And you see, I constantly kind of go back to the Magdalene. And in many ways, I made it overt. But then I found as more I progressed that I would make it more covert, because I think these archetypes and these symbols are there buried in our subconscious. And it's, rather than being like this is Mary Magdalene, or this is this particular religious tradition, if you just invoke that kind of matriarchal feeling in people, that they'll have something that they can resonate. So I have fans, I'm blessed enough to have fans all over the world, and a lot of them are people who are in Islamic cultures or people who are in non-Western cultures, and they still find that these images resonate, because the mother goddess is there in all cultures. So I have a statue of Saraswati here in my studio, and I find as a musician and an artist that resonates with me just as much as Mother Mary does. And then the nightmare, the visions of the nightmare, again, that's something that you find. Robert Graves wrote about this very well in the book, The White Goddess, that there's always this kind of matriarchal muse that exists to artists since the dawn of civilization. And this is probably my most famous image, and I call it Brainstorm. And it, to me, represents the creative process, in that this started off with a very simple, the model had some curlers in her hair. And I said to her, come over here, let me take a shot of you. She really didn't want me to, but I did a profile shot. And then as I compiled the photo in Photoshop, I started to realize that the creative process is like this. You're searching for that inspiration. And the woodshed, the wood represents the woodshed. It's a term that jazz musicians use, that when you woodshed, you retreat from the world until you have your breakthrough, your artistic breakthrough. Now, obviously, that's something you find with all mystics too, that retreat from the hustle and the bustle of the cities and the world into nature is where you seek that inner voice, and you will find it. And this is again, this is a self-portrait I did just about a year ago, me and my mother. My mother, Helen, was 98, just about 99 at the time this photo was taken. I was taking care of her. She had dementia. At this point, she was really not sure who I was, but she trusted that this kind man that came to her every day was who he said he was, that he was her son, although she couldn't remember. And I learned so much about love and the true matriarchy from my mother. She passed away a month after this photo was taken, thankfully before the restrictions of COVID-19 hit. She had a long life. She was a loving mother. She touched many people's lives. So I carry her memory with me and realize that I had a very strong representation of the goddess in my life. This was an image I did of her after she passed away. That was the crone energy, which I realized that a lot of times artists, particularly male artists who depict women, will depict the nymph or the maiden, but the crone gets overlooked. And the crone is so important because the wisdom of the mother goddess, and particularly death and what lies beyond, is the great veil, the great unknown that we should depict if we are to be fully rounded artists. And this was a little pieta that I did of myself and my mother. And this was from that same day that we were there in my studio, January 1st, 2020. And we had a wonderful day together. And like I said, I spent every day of her last 6 months on earth with her. And I'm so grateful that I was able to do that. This was a tribute image that I did after she passed away, where it was compilation of different images that I thought of, that farewell song of playing her spirit off into the other world, and of the beloved Virgin Mary, our Mother Mary Magdalene, watching over her. And I now have a shrine to my mother in my studio, and I have that statue of Mary that she looked at every day. Mm. Mary was very important to her, the mother goddess. So it's something that I carry with me, and I've come full circle in the aspect that I no longer call myself an atheist. I no longer call myself an agnostic, because I clearly saw what my mother saw as she was on her deathbed. She saw where she was going, and it gave her peace and comfort, which in turn gave me peace and comfort. So that's the journey that I want to continue to express in my music and my art. I'm very thankful to be able to share it with all of you. If you would like to see more of my work, You can see it at Thomas Dodd, that's my name, .com. And I try to keep it updated, and I have a blog there where I write my thoughts as well. Thanks again to Kayleen and all of you for having me be here with you today and share my work. Thank you very much. And I will get to turn it over to Kayleen.
Thank you, Thomas. And I believe that this image that you see before you, Thomas titled Dogma. It's one of my favorites. And I love that. I think that what happens with silence and with the arts, whether visual or whether music, is we find the place that is beyond dogma, that speaks to each of us in the depth of our human heart. And that's very much what I want to put out a call for right now. I hope that the wonderful creative spirits that you've encountered today will be people that you will meet again. And I want to encourage each and every one of you to listen in the depth of your own heart in silence to what is the song, what is the image that wants to come through you. And our hope then is that this year in July, we'll have an international festival of the arts from the perspective of Mary Magdalene being every woman and being the force that can open her cloak of compassion to unite us all. So this is a vision that Jim and I are incubating together and hoping to bring forth as the foster parents for this. And so, Jim, if you would like to come back on. And then I just want to say that we only got to hear a little bit of the Tree of Life, the Ilono song by Catherine. And so as we end today, after our words are finished, it seems appropriate that we would leave you with song in Aramaic. So Rick will put on the Ilono chant once Jim is finished.
Thank you, Kayleen. Thank you, Thomas. Amy Blumenshine put a nice little quip in the chat, Thomas. A doubting Thomas no more. It's an amazing journey you've had from an atheist bordering on agnostic to just embracing the spirituality of the mother and the feminine, and re-quickening your spiritual path. That was beautiful. And Catherine, that was just amazing. And David, your 3 minutes of silence, I just entered into it fully and appreciated silence. We have too much noise in our lives, and I think there's deep wisdom in what you were bringing into our presence today. So thank you for that. And Kayleen, thank you for that narrative. There's just so much more, and before we have Catherine give us our final song, I just want to offer an invitation to just imagine, everyone, if the central image, the icon of Christianity was not the cross, was not original sin and the negation of nature and the woman and the flesh. But just imagine if it was the eternal embrace of Mary Magdalene and Jesus in perpetual union, in creative ecstasy. Just think of how Christianity would have been different. Just imagine if, rather than stamping her out and condemning her as harlot and sin, the early church had embraced Mary Magdalene like Jesus did. And women and men would have presided together. Just imagine if Mary Magdalene and Peter, Mary Magdalene and Paul have shaped the early Christian tradition, and women and men consecrating each other and consecrating the Spirit would have been the interstices that knitted the early Christian community together. Just imagine if, rather than condemning the priest to celibacy, men and women would have been invited into the priesthood. and that there'd been as many women popes as men. Just think of where Christianity would be 2,000 years later. That was a path not taken. But with Mary Magdalene emerging into the collective psyche at this moment of critical concern, and the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary, 1954, where the Virgin Mother that Thomas referred to was doctrinally ex cathedra. That means the Pope, for the first and only time in church history, speaking infallibly, articulated the doctrine of the Assumption of Mary as Mother of God. And the Trinity became a quaternity, and Mary Magdalene emerged at the same time. So there are deep issues here, theological issues, psycho-emotional issues, gender issues, sociological, historical issues, and most fundamentally, spiritual issues that we've touched on in this session. And we invite you just to contemplate as questions. You know, we at Ubiquity and we at the Wisdom School, we are in the Socratic tradition. We just ask the questions. Wouldn't it be amazing if? And Kayleen, I'm so looking forward to shaping 2021 around Mary Magdalene. And when we get to her feast day in July, everyone, we're going to be partnering with Kayleen and Mythica and these other organizations to do a celebration of Mary Magdalene. And Thomas, I hope you're there, and Catherine, David, and many, many others who have been enchanted by this deep mystery of the male and female in ecstatic union as the Spirit works its will to higher truth. So we'll be circling back throughout the winter and spring as we prepare the momentum and the promotion for this Mary Magdalene conference. And we're even thinking about a school of Mary Magdalene studies with Kayleen as a way of underscoring how important her return to the Christian spiritual tradition actually is. She is not a marginal figure. She was central to the origin of the great religion known as Christianity. And now she's back with a mission to reimagine Christian origins and thereby the Christian future. So anyway, we'll keep everybody informed. And so I want to thank the panel. And then tomorrow, everyone, we're going to go into the subtleties. You know, it's interesting, you know, Thomas with his images, Catherine with her song, David with his silence, Kayleen with her narrative and beautiful pictures. It was working on you energetically. Well, tomorrow we're going to explore with Dr. Peter Mary, and who's just written a new book, Leading from the Field. How does the energetic world work? Actually, that's going to be our topic. And he's going to be joined by Kayla Rain, who's a master of the invisible realms, by Jim Hickman, who's a professor of neuroscience at Ubiquity. So that'll be the subject tomorrow as we gather once again, day 152 at 5 o'clock p.m. Central European Time. And now right before Catherine, I want to invite everyone to join the after chat session. You'll see the link in the chat box. It's just a beautiful opportunity to kind of debrief in an informal way to get to know one another after the formalities of these presentations. So thank you, everyone. And now we'll close out with Catherine. Catherine?
Rick, can you play? Rick is going to play the Ilono.
Yeah, we just had a small problem.
Catherine, that was breathtaking. Thank you so, so much. Thank you, everyone. This has been a beautiful session. We'll see you tomorrow, 5:00 p.m. Central European Time, back here on Zoom. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.